Today is going to be the day we talk about Stadia's future, and man, I don't even know where to start with all the positive news that we received today. If you missed it, today Stadia had a Google for Games Developer Summit explaining future plans for how publishers and developers will not only make more money in the future, but how it's going to be much easier to get games developed for Stadia. Not only that, but new incentive programs will be enabled here to expand on Stadia Pro to hopefully have more games and stay there for potentially longer. This is going to be a big video as I break down all the news as best as I can. If you're new here, subscribe to always be up to date with all things Stadia related and Stadia coverage, as well as Stadia live streams and future community events. So my goodness, today's a Google developer event. I fully expected somewhat to be a bore and not really have a lot of information, maybe some glimpses into the future of what Stadia is doing. And really guys, that got broken wide open as we now have a clear-cut idea of what Stadia is going to do going forward. And man, this is really good. I'm going to break down the talking points in this event, then give you guys my final thoughts towards the end of the video. But let's go ahead and start with what I think is potentially the biggest news for us consumers. And there was actually a lot of big news here. That is that going forward, the process of bringing games and developing for Stadia is now going to be much easier. If you didn't know before, pretty much most of the games for the past few years had to be essentially developed specifically for Stadia with Vulkan. Meanwhile, cloud platforms like Luna and GeForce Now have a very simple porting process that pretty much gave all the games launched on those services right away with not a lot of effort. For Stadia though, it's been a giant thing. Now keep in mind, I'm going to keep things in layman's terms here, not just for you, but for me as well. So when Stadia hasn't had games come day and date as other platforms, it's usually because publishers and developers had to allocate time, resources, and money to make a game on Stadia. So Stadia typically has been the last priority when it comes to a game release or even game updates. Well, today the Stadia team talked about how now going forward, this is all going to be much easier, not just in the development and porting over a game to Stadia, but even when testing their games with a more seamless approach. Now going forward, developers can stay within their engines that they're used to working, like Unity and Unreal, and don't have to mess with that Vulkan stuff to work on getting their game onto Stadia. They even talked about custom engines will also be supported and worked through with the new and improved Stadia porting toolkit. So not to continue to bore you with more technical nuances, but overall, this entire process is now much easier, faster, and it costs less because you're spending less time getting your game over to Stadia. I don't know if you guys need much more explanation further on this, but man, this really does open the floodgates for pretty much any game, any publisher to now get their game onto the platform much easier. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in my final thoughts, but this is super huge. And now that we know games being ported over to Stadia is easier and much simpler, Stadia has announced new benefits for publishers and developers bringing their games over, and this is news that is massive as well, because starting on October 1st and going until the end of 2023, keep in mind that year right there, 2023, Stadia is changing the revenue sharing to let developers and publishers get 85% of all the revenue. This does include the full price of the game, microtransactions, pre-orders, and even add-on content. This is obviously a stark difference between Xbox, PlayStation, and Steam. Those take 30% cuts. Google is only going to take 15%. That's it. And again, this is running for a few years going forward. This right here is huge incentive, especially for those who thought maybe, well, it's not worth it to bring our games over to Stadia because the platform is still growing and isn't as big as others. Now this gives them a bit more cushion to look at those numbers a little differently and go, okay, is this worth it for sure that we are now getting that 85% cut? But the thing that I've been harping on for over a year now, and actually I've been talking about how Stadia Pro really needs to evolve and be much bigger since almost when Stadia released, I've been talking about that. Well, big changes are happening starting now. Every game that becomes part of Stadia Pro going forward will get an industry-leading 70% of the subscription revenue based on engagement. So that means every time you or me decide to play, for example, Ark Survival Evolved, each day we play it and we have it claimed on Stadia Stadia Pro will give some money to the developer or publisher of that game. So what this hopefully will now do going forward is that more of these publishers and developers opt into putting their game on Stadia Pro, and at the same time keep it for even longer, really expanding upon Stadia Pro and making it to where there is just more games and more variety, of course ensuring people are getting paid at the same time. This is pretty huge as well and can really open the floodgates for more monetization. Not only that, but to top all of this, a new affiliate marketing program, something completely new to any gaming platform, will now be launched and will have this built into where anytime they click their unique link to their game and it converts a new Stadia user to a paid Stadia Pro subscriber, they will get $10 for each person. So this is on top of that new 70% subscription revenue. So there is a lot of ways to make money by having your game marketed, but also on Stadia Pro. This new affiliate program though won't be available until the first half of next year. So alright guys, with all that information I just gave you guys, wow. So right away, if you're not noticing, all these points almost work hand in hand together, and one key point that was mentioned in these presentations was how Stadia now has a reach of 100 million potential customers, and really that is just the tip of the iceberg of what cloud gaming can actually reach. This is why Amazon, Nvidia, Xbox is all in on cloud gaming, and why Xbox's own Phil Spencer has previously said that he saw Google and Amazon as his main competitors more so than he did PlayStation or Nintendo. It's because 100 million people right now looks great on paper, but this can reach billions of people, and Stadia has now positioned themselves today to lock themselves on being competitive, and they have needed all these changes and all these incentives that they announced today. First thing, starting off with making it easier to develop and make a game for Stadia. I cannot quantify how huge that is. It's why you see GeForce Now launching 30 to 60 games a month, because it's easy for them. Stadia should hopefully see a similar process that makes it easier to get your favorite games or my favorite game on Stadia, and then add in the fact that more revenue will be had on your end for the developer and publisher. Well, why not bring your game over to Stadia when again it can have the reach of hundreds of millions of people to play essentially your game anywhere, TV, mobile, tablet, PC, it doesn't matter. Then we have Stadia Pro being even a juicier prospect now for these developers and publishers. And then think about when someone signs up and they see 50 plus or 100 plus games available, and then those developers and publishers are getting direct profit as well as an affiliate incentive. You can see why I'm personally getting extremely excited. I will say I hope that this affiliate program does extend to creators as well, as you might be able to convince some of these massive YouTubers to market Stadia themselves and convert people to Stadia Pro members and really gain some cash on their end and really change the perception of Stadia itself. So I hope that affiliate program does get expanded upon. Another thing that I want to point out is that there were zero mentions of white labeling, something that I thought we'd actually hear about today. And I don't think the prospects of Stadia working with big publishers on releasing their own cloud gaming version is actually going away, because we just last week saw a job description for Stadia mentioning just that. But I want to point out that the focus was on growing Stadia itself to its fullest today in that developer summit. So for those who have been worried about the platform or it going away, folks, that's not happening. And the reason is because what I mentioned earlier, there is too much to gain when they can reach billions of people. This is why I've had confidence in Stadia for a long time, and why that confidence is going to remain. Stadia is doing something that other platforms are not, and that's giving you the choice between buying the games you want or also having that Netflix portion with Stadia Pro that should hopefully be expanded upon in the future. And I think they found a good way to incentivize both of those together while still being the absolute best cloud gaming platform performance-wise. That has not changed in my opinion, and I don't think it'll change anytime soon as the years here go forward and internet and 5G just gets better and better. Stadia is really positioning themselves to make a lot of noise, and if you're a Stadia user, today I think you should be ecstatic as I am. But of course, all this news is great, and we do need to see all of this in practice. That means more developers and publishers signing up, and hopefully they can see that it's easier to develop for Stadia, at the same time knowing they are making more money than they would have before, and of course being profitable, especially as the reach for cloud gaming gets further and further, and this becomes part of gaming's future. With that, guys, if you're new, subscribe as I cover all things Stadia. Hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and let me know down below, guys, all your thoughts on all of this. Are you guys more excited for Stadia's future? What do you think of all these new changes? Do you think it will make a difference in Stadia's future? And what would you like to see continue going forward? And what new changes would you like to see with Stadia in itself? I always read all your comments, so right below. And if you guys don't know me, my name is Sunny, and as always, I'll see you guys in the clouds.